Good evening, everyone, and you're very welcome to tonight's webinar. It's just turned 7:30, so we're going to kick off. The title of tonight's webinar is Supporting Relevant Learning During This Challenging Time. A lot of people here I've seen have logged onto the Padlet. That's there to support this evening's webinar, and it can be accessed by the link there, bit.ly/relevantpe. And a lot of people would have received it in an email earlier this evening as well. My name is Michael Carey. I'm the team leader for physical education within JCT, and I'm really looking forward to tonight's webinar. I'm joined by the Brady Bunch, a huge motley crew gathered from all around the country. Martina Finneran, who teaches in Scolmurra in Strokestown in Roscommon. Amy Cotter, a teacher in Virginia College in Cavan. Claire Walsh, who is a physical education teacher educator in UL. David Gannon, who's an associate advisor. Sinead McHugh is a teacher in Loretto Secondary School. And Kira Byrne is one of my colleagues in JCT, one of my full-time colleagues, and she is responsible for social, personal and health education. So us seven are all working with JCT primarily in the associate role. But we'd really like to extend our warm welcome to Patrick Donnelly, who's also joining us from St. Coleman's College in Fermoy. So between the 8 of us, we hope to support you and support our conversation this evening. And we'll have some lovely snapshots from Amy, David and Patrick as the evening progresses. So through navigating the webinar, we will be using our Padlet page. I'm hoping that one of my colleagues might post that in our chat. It's accessible via bit.ly/relevantpe, but of course you can access it also by the email hopefully that you would have received earlier today for those that are registered early. Your pane to the right hand side of your screen, you should have a navigation pane, and I'm going to draw your attention to two things on that. The first thing is our support document, which is available via that navigation pane. It's in the handouts section, and it's a JCT support document. The second thing that I'd like to draw your attention to is the questions tab. Here we go. Sorry, is the questions tab. So that's just below it. So if you do have a question that you want to ask staff, please post it there. But I do think a lot of our interaction will be happening via the Padlet page that we'll be working with. Okay. The support document was sent to you earlier today, and as I said in the previous slide, the support document is available from your handouts tab. This support document will be looking at advice and support available from the Department of Education and Skills, case studies and snapshots of practice from various schools. It will look at the learning outcomes within the short course in physical education, the learning outcomes that, regardless of a national emergency or not, will be the building blocks for our P programme. We look at further supports and self-care for teachers at this time. So I hope that accompanying document would be a huge resource for us, especially after today's webinar. The intentions, as outlined in the email earlier and in the advertisements, we want to identify relevant learning for students during these unprecedented times. We want to engage with ideas for student-centered distant learning experiences by physical education teachers. So we're looking at ideas that teachers have had on how to make this really meaningful and relevant student-centered experiences, and how we can really activate students in terms of their opinions and their voice in terms of what learning should be led at this time. So moving directly to that, we're going to engage you from the very start via our Padlet page. So we'll ask you to navigate to that Padlet page, and we're really looking at what aspect of learning in physical education is most relevant to students' needs currently. So I'm going to navigate to that page now. It's our Padlet page, and it's activity 1 here in the first column. So what aspect of learning in physical education is most relevant to our students' needs? So I'm going to give maybe a minute or 90 seconds just to complete that, and we'll have a good scan then to see are there any common threads that are arising. So please take your time to do that now. And for anybody that might have had difficulty in accessing the Padlet, I've just added it to the chat section. So a message has gone to the full audience here with that Padlet link. And my apologies for not having it there from the very start. So the Padlet link should be accessible in the chat section of your navigation pane on the right-hand side of the screen. So I'm going to start scanning and just seeing what trends are coming up. And I've just been informed that that has also been added to the JCT Twitter link. So it's great. Okay, so a few things that are coming to the fore here. Okay, so my initial scan of activity 1 while you're filling in your own comments or maybe looking through it yourself. Things that stand out for me here is learning to be active for life, health-related activity, where students are more than likely aware of the health-related components at this time, but they may not have been participating in any sort of physical activity since the lockdown has occurred. David Cullen, staying physically fit, mentally resilient and being tenacious in the face of not being able to do normal activities of daily living. And I think, David, you can actually add to that in terms of not having the normal social interaction, which are a huge cornerstone of the experience of our young people in school. Motivation, relevance and guidance. Thank you for that to that contributor. Aaron O'Donnell, active number 1, and then where possible education and reflection on activities. And I like to see that people are actually responding. So Susan Byrne has responded there to Aaron's comment, and you can feel free to do that during it as well. Susan has mentioned physical activity for mental well-being, physical activity for enjoyment, and the benefits of being active for the body, mind, sleep, and relaxation. Self-efficacy and developing lifelong participation, and looking at the benefits of physical activity as a preventive medicine. So we're seeing a very clear thread here, and I'm scanning through to develop their IT skills. Very interesting. Okay, and I think we're seeing that it's because so much of our skills are happening with students at the moment, or so many of our interactions are happening digitally with students. I think that's a very worthwhile one. Maeve, thank you for joining us from Blarney. Keeping active, self-management, healthy habits, food, sleep, activity. And I think we're seeing a very strong correlation there. Excellent. Gillian O'Connor, mental and physical well-being. So I think a lot of the learning that we're mentioning here is very relevant to probably that initial strand, physical activity for health and well-being, physical literacy, and Mick McGrath has commented that it's knowledge and intrinsic motivation to exercise for health. So I think we're seeing a very strong thread here, okay? And even without going back to the slides, which will map the next two things, activity 2 and activity 3 in our Padlet page are directly linked to that number 1. So we really identified what the relevant learning is. And I think physical activity for health and well-being was highlighted very strongly. And then ICT, there were a few outliers, well, relevant outliers is what I call it, in terms of ICT. So maybe through activity 1, or activity 2, what have you done to date to support this learning? And do you feel that it's been effective and why? Okay, so that's activity 2. So we might just take some time in looking through that. And as you do that, I'm just going to scan back through activity 1 to see if there are any other insights that are worth of sharing or vary or differ. A very interesting one was linking IT, so information technology, but linking people to relevant governing bodies for sports, especially new sports. When we look at our support document, 2 key supports offered by Athletics Ireland and Swim Ireland are highlighted in a section on that. So I think that thanks for this contribution, who's just come up as anonymous. I think part of the resource that goes with tonight's webinar mentions those, but also shows the other national governing bodies. Fun in P is vital, so it naturally becomes a life skill. Very interesting in terms of relevant learning. So although we can't look at them all now, this will be here as an archive for you to return to after. So I'm going to look at a few of the answers to activity 2. Okay, there's quite an encompassing one here. What have you done? Create a reflective diary to help take notice of your body, sleep and exercise, and how they all connect. So students they're in one location. It's like a control group in some ways. They're a control group in their own house. So they can create a reflective diary to help take notice of their body, sleep and exercise and how they're all connected. And there's quite a lot of follow-up on that one in terms of 4 comments to that one. Fitness journal or diary. So we're seeing a similarity here in terms of keeping a diary. Marathon and May challenge using Nike Run Club for both staff and students. Class kilometers challenge. So you're adding in a competitive dimension there for between each year group. And I'm just going to scroll down. Luckily was planning a dance module, and social media and viral dances are very easy and fun for the students to do. And it's identified there girls more than boys. So thanks for adding in the challenge that you're facing there in terms of your work there. A P at Home Padlet that's updated regularly. Aoife O'Malley created a P department Padlet page, and I think we've 1 or 2 examples of that in our resource booklet as well. Aaron has looked very much at athletics and running. So in live classes, getting students to try different running techniques. I've heard of an example where students are asked to make a podcast as they run, maybe as they work at different intensities. O. Thornton, I unfortunately don't know your first name, providing options at a senior level to participate and encourage engagement for all students. Effective in particular for students who are not particularly sporty, can choose to go for a walk or run and track it on an app. Weekly circuits and a run across Europe challenge. Very good, hopefully within 5K. Photo orienteering challenge, new every week. That's a very interesting one. I'd really like you to build on that in time, maybe in that comment. I can't visualize it. I'd really like to see what it's like. So feel free to add a photograph or more to that, because I'm interested in seeing what it's like. And we're seeing Padlet come to the fore, Couch at 5K. So we can see a lot of our learning of what we're doing in activity 2 directly linking to activity 1. And I hope that everybody that's watching this is getting as many ideas as I am from just observing them. And I haven't scrolled through even 1/3 of them there yet. Range of activities and challenges. Stephen Cahill, Zoom, Padlet, apps, challenges has been effective to date with the students that would be self-motivated. And I think, Stephen, the challenge is getting to those students that are hard to reach. Not only in school, they're hard to reach, but sometimes it's even more challenging when there's distance involved. So I could spend a lot of time here. G. Byrne has had a comment, but she left it blank. Gillian, I presume you're doing stuff, but you've left that comment blank for a moment. Pre-recorded exercise and fitness videos. So we're seeing quite a lot of different activities there. And I'm going to move people on, because we saw here in just one of our last comments, just going to go to it again, because it linked very closely to, this was quite easy for students that were motivated. I've just lost the comment. But one of the teachers mentioned that it's quite easy to do this with the students that are already motivated. So in activity 3, we're going to dig into that a bit deeper. What are the varying needs amongst the students in your context? And what different approaches have you used to meet these needs? And perhaps give one concrete example, because one concrete example would be very helpful for everyone. So when we think about the variety of needs in our classroom, what are we doing to reach those hard to reach students? Or for those high performing athletes in our physical education class, what are we doing to challenge or to stretch them? So the various needs could be, special education needs, they could be hard to reach students, or they could be students that are extremely talented. So just give it a bit of thought. And I'd really like if you could maybe document the approaches that you've taken to that. So I'm just having a quick scan of this. There are a few things that are just going to the fore just from my scan of 5 or 6 comments. Providing options and providing choice on a kind of a sliding scale is coming across very strongly. There are 2 that are linking strongly here. For example, Davy Cullen has mentioned communicating with parents, trying to bring parents into the conversation when students are disengaging, but even when students are engaging and affirming the work that they're doing. So definitely engaging with parents is a strong one if possible. Just looking through, Martin Quinn here has mentioned the family context as well and equipment. So it's so I presume, Martin, that some have a limitation in terms of the equipment they can have, and every family context is going through challenges of their own at this type as well as the community context and access to open spaces. So Martin, I think the challenges, and I think you're right, there could be challenges in the urban context that may not be the case in rural locations. So I think you've identified a huge variety there. Giving them choice. There can be overkill in terms of social media content. I hope we're not doing that today, Martin. There's a challenge. I think it's picking what's right for you and for your students is the key. And Martin has given a very good example from Joey Barton, former soccer player. So it would be interesting, Martin, to maybe build on that, maybe add a link, maybe in the comment section. Diverse home environments is a challenge. That's coming across very strongly again there. And thanks for that quite long contribution. Setting a personal goal and an individualized goal is a huge way of meeting that need, because the same goal won't apply to everyone. And perhaps it could be challenged by choice. So there's a huge array of different things here. Students need facilities and equipment, somebody or something to motivate them. They need knowledge. An important requirement is supervision, as they might put themselves in danger if they apply incorrect techniques in certain activities. I think that's a very well made point. And we have to be very careful with what we're expecting of students, especially in terms of safety. Ms. Lynch, including a variety of challenges. So I'm seeing choice, I'm seeing individualized goals coming very strongly to the fore here. And we might do a review of this column in a minute, because there's a huge richness of ideas coming to the fore. Kevin Campbell, some students are babysitting brothers and sisters as parents are working on the front line or as parents are working from home. And Kevin, you're right, we're working with 12 to 15-year-olds at junior cycle and obviously a senior cycle older students, so they are in positions of responsibility. So you've made, it was one that I hadn't considered as strong in the preparation here. Old School Initiative is a way that Aaron O'Donnell School are trying to overcome this. So I'm going to move it there. We've had a really nice snapshot of the relevant learning, what we've done to date, and I think activity 3 is looking at those hard to reach students in our particular context. And sometimes supports will be put in place for those hard to reach students, or supports that will stand everyone in good stead. So with that, I'm going to go back to our PowerPoint, if I can. Here we are. My apologies. Here we go. So I'm just going to bring us all back to the PowerPoint, if that's okay. So you should be able to see my screen again. We've looked at those 3 activities, and I want to thank you for your contribution. And those are archived there for you to go back to, activity 1, 2, and 3. But I just want to look at probably our key source of support during this, because the Department of Education and Skills have given schools quite a lot of guidance on the continuity of schooling. So this document was released, it was the 2nd of April that this document was released, and it aimed to support schools to provide all of their students. And that links back to our hard to reach students with an effective education program insofar as possible in the current context. And I think that it was very well thought, very well considered, that one of the first paragraphs in this document was, this is not an easy time for teachers, students and their families. It's a particularly difficult time for students who are homeless or marginalised, students with special educational needs, whose families might be experiencing stress and uncertainty, and students preparing for this year's examinations. And I think it's important to reflect on the last 3 columns that we had there. We've identified the relevant learning, but we also have to be very aware of the context that people are in and of the expectations that we place on ourselves, on our students, and on their families in supporting their learning as well. So this document is very much grounded in that awareness. And the document provided information on 6 things: the role of schools in engaging, the importance of collaboration, PE teachers not working in isolation, but linking with other departments and school leaders to be aware of what work is being provided and what learning is happening, and how best to support students, especially those that might be experiencing difficulties, as we saw in the last slide. Keeping in touch with students. There was one of the comments that came up there that I didn't refer to, but I had read in passing. It was sometimes it's just maintaining communication is what students need to maintain their connection and to maintain their well-being. So I think that was a well-made point, and I didn't bring it up at the time. Helping students and teachers stay well. So with regard to that, there's a huge focus in our continuity of schooling to help students and teachers stay well. Keeping in touch, staying safe in a distance learning environment. So there's some key health messages that as a system, as an education system, we have to transmit. And then state examinations in the post-primary sector. And obviously there's huge conversations over the last month and ongoing this evening regarding the status there. So that guidance was issued at the start of April. Of particular, and I'm just linking back to the key piece here in red, helping students and teachers stay well. When we focus in on the document about what supports are there and what guidance is there, it was very much linked to the advice and resource that were developed by NEPS to aid children and young people staying well during COVID-19. So quite early in the emergency, or in the national emergency, advice for young people was issued while schools are closed, in terms of having a plan for the day and a routine, relaxation techniques, and I think there were plans and written pieces and podcasts provided on the site there, and information regarding the state examinations. The support document goes into this in a bit more detail, so I'm not going to dwell on it now, but I think it's a very good reference point for us. What I found interesting is that there was a huge amount of information for parents and carers' well-being and self-care, and for teacher well-being and self-care. And we'll look at that last point, teacher well-being, a small bit later in tonight's presentation. With regard to resources, it is well worth navigating to this page at some stage, because there are some very helpful and short, they're about a minute to a minute and 30 seconds recordings about staying active and connected as a student, staying responsible and informed, and staying positive and calm. And there are 3 short but very meaningful resources that, if we haven't, we could do well in issuing to our students and making sure that they're aware of it, especially those students that may be in need of these 3 particular messages. So with that, we've come to a kind of a seminal point in it. I'm going to hand over to a number of teachers here. And just to frame it at the very start, the support document has got more information on the testimony of our 3 teachers here. We'll have David Gannon, we'll have Amy Cotter, and we'll have Patrick Donnelly. So I think it's good to listen to their messages, knowing that you've got support in terms of the resource document after. So with that, control of the board to my colleague, David Gannon. So just bear with me for 1 second, please. So I'm just handing control of the screen to David Gannon, and hopefully he'll be able to accept that. And I'm also going to make sure that David here is unmuted. So please bear with me. Yep. There you go, David.
Yeah, can you hear me? Perfect. Hello, everybody. My name is from the lovely photo of me there, and I'm in Mansfield Gorman in Enniscorthy in Wexford, and I'll kind of be talking through the 9 questions that you can see in front of you, and kind of just linking back to what was said earlier on. We all have our own context, and it's very important, I suppose, to state my own context is that it's a rural school and that the students have iPads and they all have their own school email. So that did allow me to access Student Voice, and it did make it a little bit easier. But I'll discuss how I did access the Student Voice at the beginning. Oh, allows me to click on. So the first thing that I did was I created, as you can see on your right hand side there, a checklist, and the checklist was created in the idea that we wouldn't have overload, that we wouldn't ask them to do too much that was going on with what was going on at the time. And it was also based on the HSE guidelines for Little Things Matter, if people remember from a few years ago. So things about, are they getting enough sleep? Are they eating well? Are they drinking enough water? Are they talking to friends? And I'd read at the time about how talking to someone face to face was better than texting or WhatsApp. So they were specifically said, FaceTime a friend or Skype them or use whatever device or Zoom or whatever it was that they were going to use along. And then to access that voice, what I wanted to do was I wanted to ask them some questions. So you can see that there are 4 questions there at the bottom, and the first 3 questions are actually linked to our school self-evaluation plan, where students were asked at the end of each lesson, what was easy, what have I learned that I didn't know at the beginning of the day, and what do I need to work on? And then I used those questions and the answers to those questions to kind of access the student voice and then see where we were going from there on in. I also decided to give them something to do, something that was simple, that they could, a skill that they could learn each week. And I was also conscious of the fact, and it was mentioned earlier on, about lack of equipment and lack of space. So I did 4 really simple videos, and I videoed myself and shared it with them, juggling, trying to keep a tennis ball up in the air with my feet, trying to keep 2 tennis balls up in the air with a hurley, and trying to keep a football up in the air. And I just asked them to work on those skills for a week. And I got lots and lots of feedback from the students about that. So what I learned from that is, at the end of the week, they had to take a photograph of their checklist and send it back to me. And I learned that nearly all of the students were exercising nearly every day, whereas less than half of them read every day. But it wasn't something that I was expecting. They were conscious of it, and they were active, and they were going out and doing it. They really enjoyed setting themselves this personal challenge and a target for them to go for, and I wanted to do something more about that. And something that I really noticed that it was that those students who are quiet in class, who participate well, not brilliantly all the time, sometimes better than others, seemed to be much more engaged with this physical activity than those who were sporty students, for want of a better word, but more students who, for them, physical activity was going to football training or going to basketball training. And for me, I found that they found the changeover much more difficult than for those people who may have been participating in physical activity themselves outside of it. As I was moving forward, those learnings told me to give them lots and lots of choice, to create a way to allow pupils to structure their activities, and then to create an environment where they felt they were connected through physical activity. So the first bit about giving lots of choice was the skills moved from the 4 bits that I had videoed and shared with them to about 30 different skills that they could choose from. So we had physical skills and non-physical skills. So physical skills, they just had to pick one from things like, can you jump 2 meters, because that's the social distance? Can you walk 10,000 steps every day for the week? Can you run without stopping for 12 minutes? And then some of the non-physical skills were learn a magic trick, or paint, or draw, or write a poem. I had juggling in there as well, again, so that they could continue on with some of the stuff that they wanted to do. The feedback that I got from a lot of this was that the students liked that they were able to do it, that they didn't need anything, and it gave them a goal and motivated towards them. But the last bit that I was looking for there, that prompted me to create an environment where they felt connected through physical activity. That was much more for those people who are usually involved with teams, and that they have that team connection and the competitiveness of it. So that led me on to doing our next task, which they're currently undertaking. So this is the activity competition between first and second years. So they're in their class group. And at the moment, I have 75% of first years and 82% of second years engaging, but that's growing. So that's what it was in the second week. It was a little bit lower the first week, and I've already gotten more responses for this week coming in, because they're supposed to send them in on Friday. And what they were to do is they were to earn points for the physical activity that they undertook in the day, but it was so broad that they could pick anything. And if you see in this, on the second row down, or the second row down in the column on the right hand side, I have a class with Joe Wicks or other people online. And the reason I put Joe Wicks down was I said, I want to give them something specific, but if they don't like that, they can go look for something. Instead of giving this big general, find a class for yourself online, that it would be too much. But you can go down and you can see that there's walking and running and cycling, but there's also things like hoovering and washing the floors and gardening, that any sort of activity has been won. And the person who's actually done the best out of everybody so far is a person who goes horse riding for 3 hours a day. Again, coming back to our rural school and the access to those facilities that they have in the school. And the feedback that I've gotten from the students is that they like the competition between the classes, that it motivates them, that they like that they don't have to go anywhere to do exercise. And then one second year student, that they enjoy that they're looking after themselves, that responsibility, that they can say, okay, I'm not feeling great, how do I move forward? And that person has taken up yoga and Pilates, he mentioned twice. For third year students, I used the opportunity, and again the checklist, to see could we move it on into how we could report, and especially reporting towards their junior cycle profile of achievement and the other areas of learning for well-being. So we decided that we would use their diary, their homework diary, which is not being used now, as a reflective diary and what the students would do, and I get them a list of questions that they might want to answer as the day went on. But I was shocked really with some of the answers that came back, and these are just translations of what I have, but the way that they were able to articulate how that they weren't doing anything and how they turned their day around and how they use the skills that they've learned. And I wasn't expecting that to arrive so soon. I was expecting what a lot still do is I got up at this time and I ate this, and I much more of a staccato structured diary as opposed to a reflective piece. But all of this has, from this year, what have I learned from the whole experience and how do I move forward going into next September, is that I've loads of evidence of what my first, second and third years have done for the last 8 weeks. I am aware of a lot of them, and I'm also aware of the people who haven't done anything, and then I'm making contact with those individually to say, what's going on? Are you okay? Do you need any help? As opposed to, why aren't you participating in this activity? I've also learned that only some students see PE as sport. The majority are seeing it as physical activity, and that isn't something that I would feel I hear in class as much, because those student voices that are soccer players or rugby players or Gaelic football or hurlers, they generally stronger voices and louder voices and more boisterous voices in the class, and they seem to overtake those more reflective voices or maybe quieter voices in the class. As I've said before, they have something that can guide them for reporting and well-being. And also, what I have and what they're learning in PE, it's very obvious to parents, because going back to our checklists, a lot of the students printed it out, stuck it up on the fridge, and they ticked it off every day. So students were aware of what was going on and that they could move forward. And that's the end of my piece. I think Mike is going to take over from me now and pass on to the next teacher. Thank you very much for listening.
Great, David. Thank you very much for that. And there's a few questions coming in as you were presenting. Can the templates be shared? I'm sure, David, we'll definitely share them via Padlet as this progresses. And David, you might maybe share it on the second last column of the Padlet if you're happy to do so. But we'll definitely get those up. So I'm gonna mute now, and I'm gonna hand over to our second presenter, who is Amy Cotter. So just bear with us again, please. And I'm just going to ask Amy to unmute herself there, if possible.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can, Amy. And if you could show your screen as well, there you go. Thank you. You're perfect now.
Okay, so I'm going to run through these questions again, very similarly to what David just did. So to just start with my school context, we're very strong tradition of PE, and we do engage in a wide range of extracurricular and sport. Because of this, we weren't really worried about the physical activity levels of our students outside of school. So we were providing challenges and things like that, such like the GAA Future Leaders program. They were providing challenges. But after a while, I kind of felt that I should do more of a check-in with my students. So we are not a digital school, but we are all set up on Teams and Microsoft, so all of our students have emails. So what I did was create a form with 4 questions, as you can see there on the left: which year group they were, their activity level right now at home, how they'd like to be supported, and if they had any suggestions in which ways they'd like to be supported. So as you can see in the pie chart, these 4 areas were suggestions that I had put in the question on how they'd like to be supported. So challenges was about 25%, a monthly plan such as a fitness plan or a couch to 5K was the least popular. A big majority of my second year said they didn't need any assistance, and almost quarter again said videos, video links to workouts and things like that. But the most interesting was the findings in their suggestions. So things like flexibility, mental health, challenges again, walks and advice. So the advice was regarding how far they should walk a day and how many steps they should be getting in a day, and fun family games is another suggestion. So these things would not be very popular in my PE lessons. I tried to do mobility before and it wasn't they didn't engage as well with it. So seeing things like flexibility and mental health was a nice change. So from here, what I wanted to do was create aims so I can address these suggestions. So I wanted to build up their endurance, as they'd all be going on to the athletics module now. So be that through their walking or their running. I wanted to link with their other subjects. So healthy eating was another suggestion. So we could link that in with their home ec, try to make them active for life. I did want them to be more reflective, especially in my first years. I have 3 classes. So preparing them going into second year when they'd have to do reflective pieces. Setting goals and targets, have activities family oriented, different types of activities, work on their mindset and be creative. So how did I do this? So with my first years, I heard from another PE and science teacher about the NASA Mars mission, which is train like an astronaut. So my first years would have just finished off Earth and Space, so I thought it would link nicely across my subjects. And what I did was go onto their website, and that document that you see on the right is one of their tasks. So I started off with this very simple one, which is building up to walk a mile. So you just set out a mini course and you build up your endurance, either walking or running. On the website, they would recommend to journal along with it, but they don't provide it. So the second document that's tucked behind, that is one that I created myself. So there's lots of prompting questions like how they felt before they did the activity, did they sleep well, how is their mood, then how far did they go, what their pace was, how did they feel afterwards, linking in with their heart, their muscles, their energy levels. Do they feel like they're improving throughout the week? And then any other observations. So to add the competition into it, it's interclass. I was doing it between my 3 classes, but since I have passed it on to the rest of my DP department, and all of first year is doing this competition. So for each mile they walk, they get 1 point and 2 points for each one they run. They will submit this on Friday and then we'll make an announcement on the Monday. Now, my school would do weekly competitions with their first years anyway. So this is something they're really familiar with and I'm expecting a good bit of engagement with it. But the first lot will only come in through tomorrow, so I don't have any feedback on how well it's running yet. I did do a check-in on Wednesday and I got a few thumbs up, but nothing much else. With my second years, I wanted to try something different. So what I created was a weekly well-being challenge. So for each day, I created a theme. So Monday was Mobility Monday or Motivational Monday. So I gave them a 20-minute mobility video and also asked them to either look up a song or a motivational quote, something that they can go back to and that maybe that will all create a big bank. On Tuesday was a time trial, so building up that endurance for a kilometre, walk or run. Wednesday was a workout, so either to create a circuit with a certain types of elements, or I also added a video of a Zumba class. Thursday was trying to be more creative and include the family. So it was kind of more of a thinking challenge to create a game with certain elements or an obstacle course and see who can, do it the fastest or anything like this. And finally, Friday was Foodie Friday. So to research a recipe, maybe make a smoothie, create some energy bars or something like that, something to link in with home ec, but also involve the family if it suited their context. So my approach, that's the approach I took. It wasn't perfect. So first of all, I would say the form that I initially sent out, I probably should have left it longer to allow students to engage with it more. In terms of feedback from my second years, I should have been more specific about when and what evidence I wanted them to submit. So I provided them with the task from Monday to Friday, but I never specified that which ones I wanted at the end of the day or if I wanted them at the end of the week. And I did do some check-ins with them. So on the Monday, I did check in with them, my second years, and I posted a quote in a video, and I was getting videos and quotes back. But going forward for next week, I think I'll formalize it more about when and what evidence that I need. And that's from me. That's all I have. So I'm sure Mike will take back over.
Very good, Amy. Thank you. I think today's theme is thorough Thursday, because you've given us a very good description there. I just really like the honesty you had in terms of your approach and how you were reflecting real time as well. And I think you've probably learned from David in that he asked students to submit their work during normal PE time. So it actually allows them to align when they submit work to their, it allows them to submit time, the time that they submit work to their normal PE class time. Just want to draw people's attention to the link document, because some people are asking, look, where is the NASA link that Amy spoke to? In the support document, which I've just opened on my screen in PDF, and I just want to make sure, yes, that you can see it. I just checked the audience view there. On this document, you can see that each of the schools that I've mentioned so far, Mansfield Garman and Virginia College, if we click on Virginia College, we've got a link directly to Train Like an Astronaut that Amy has just mentioned. So a lot of the resources that Amy has spoken about and the description she gave of her theme-based week, for example, are all listed here as well at the base of that page. So that's the support. I'm going to hand over to Patrick Donnelly here, and Patrick is a PE teacher in St. Coleman's Fermoy. So I'm just going to share my screen and I'm just going to unmute Patrick. So just bear with me again for a second, please.
Can you hear me there, Mike?
We can, Patrick, yes.
And my screen is up.
Lovely. And it's all yours, Patrick. Thank you.
Cheers. As mentioned already, my name is Patrick Donnelly and I'm a teacher in St. Coleman's College. And the event we organised last weekend was for the whole school. It was a virtual 5K. Just to give you a small bit of context about the school, we have 450 boys in the school. All the boys receive 80 minutes PE each week. We have a large number of students who are involved in sports, both inside and outside of the school. So we've got lads involved in the traditional soccer, GAA, athletics. But like Dave mentioned earlier, we actually have a large number of boys into horse racing and hunter trials. Again, the rural community allows it. We also have boys who are active, but in a non-competitive way. We're very lucky in the school that we have a 1.2 kilometre Tarmacadam track around the school pitches, and it's something that the boys use quite a bit, especially during their lunch breaks. They like to eat and walk and talk all at the same time, which is great for us as a PE department. So where did the idea come from for the 5K? One of our colleagues in the staff had actually set a challenge for teachers on the staff to cover the distance of a marathon over our 2-week Easter break. And it was being tracked on the app called Strava. And as a PE department, it got us thinking. So our PE plan around this time of the year would always have a couch to 5K in our programs, because it ties in. Each year in the school, we run a fundraising event, which is a 5K, which we get the boys to run, and they collect sponsorship for it. Unfortunately, this year, with everything that's going on, it couldn't happen. So what we said we'd try and have a go at is doing a virtual 5K for fun. So I'm going to go on through the same questions that the lads went through already. So how do we access the student voice? So currently, a lot of our teaching has been done through Zoom, and we'd always start our class just general chat with the lads about how they're getting on and what they're at. And one of the things that came up was that they're doing a lot of running. Because they had a lot of pre-season training done, and what they're trying to do is maintain the level of fitness that they'd already established. But what they were really missing was the competitive side of all that. So we tried to facilitate that by organising the 5K for them. So how do we set it up? It was quite simple, especially if you are familiar with the Strava app. So the first thing you had to do was set up your own account, or if you already had an account, you could use that. Within that facility, then you have the ability to set up a club. So we set up a St. Coleman's College school club, and within the club, then we created an event for the bank holiday weekend, so a 5K race. Then what we did was we notified our students through Edmodo, which we're using as our teaching platform. We have different year groups set up. We also use the school Twitter account, which you can see in front of us there. And we also text the parents to draw their attention to the school Twitter account. And then what the boys had to do was they set up their own Strava accounts and they joined the club. And what they had to do over the bank holiday weekend was, using Strava, record their 5K run. Now, the way the app works is, once you're a member of the club, the app will automatically record your run and it'll bring it all onto the same page. So as a PE department, then all we had to do was follow the app. And what we did was we created an Excel sheet and recorded everyone's time. So what was the impact of all of this? We currently have 84 members in the club, and we're hoping to build on this by maybe doing another event towards the end of the year. But what was really interesting was the mix of people who were on the club. So currently we have a mix of current students, but also past students. We have a lot of parents in the club, but we also have people who are just in the school catchment area. So over the weekend, on Saturday and Sunday, 60 people took part in the 5K race. Now, what did I learn from it? I suppose the biggest thing that I learned from doing it was I would have changed one thing. I would have either changed it from an individual race and made it a kind of a group thing, like one of the thoughts we're having for later on in the years. If we got people to associate themselves with their local GA club, regardless if they're a member or not, that they could run as a club, and we'd take the fastest 10 times, because there is that competitive nature with a lot of the lads inside the school. Or I should have just called it a fun run. One of the things we saw as a department was that if someone ran the race early and posted a really quick time, it kind of turned some of the students off getting involved in it. So once we spotted that was happening, and we just directly messaged a few of the students to see why they weren't running it, they said there's no point, I wouldn't beat that time. We offered prizes then for each year group, so that the quickest in each year group would get a prize, and we also offered spot prizes then for anyone who took part. So that really did help to get the boys moving. But of course, it's not all about me, it's more what did the boys learn from it. Now, the great thing with the app is that every time you run, it breaks whatever activity you've done down into kilometers and how long it took you to do it. And what the boys noticed was that if they took off at a really fast pace and we got the first couple of kilometers done really quickly, they found that their time wasn't as good as what it should have been if they had done a steady pace. So what it has opened up for us during the week is a discussion around pacing and how to improve your 5K time. So that's kind of something that we might look at afterwards, because when Mike messaged me first about getting involved, he'd asked, had we done a Couch to 5K kind of program? And I said, no, but now that you've said it, we might do it afterwards. So what we're actually going to look at doing is, can we run an event and give the boys the information that they need to try and improve their time? And what we'll be hoping for then is to get more engagement from the students. So that's kind of how we did our event and how it went. I hope I've explained it. So Mike, that's kind of me done. Unless someone has questions for me.
Very good. Patrick, thank you so much for that. Just some really, I really like the way that you and Amy, just ahead of you, reflected carefully on what worked well and what didn't do well. And I think by introducing the Couch to 5Ks you mentioned there, you're bringing the focus very much back on the learning that's happening, as well as providing the physical activity outlet. You're maybe allowing students, just like David did, to actually map their progress over a period of time and to reflect on it. So what we're going to do, we're actually going to navigate to, I'm going to share my screen first of all. We're going to navigate again to the Padlet page if possible. So just bear with me for a second. I'm going to share screen, sorry. I'm going to navigate to the Padlet page, and on that Padlet page we're going to look closely at question number for activity 4 and activity 5. Okay, activity 4, first of all, what has been effective regarding how David, Amy, our student access student voice to support their planning? So we might, if possible, we might take just a moment to maybe add a quick comment to that there. What did you find to be effective about how David, Amy, or Patrick access student voice to support their planning? And just thinking back, David was doing it very much on asking students to reflect on a day-by-day basis and to submit at a point in time during the week. Amy reflected very much at the start of the planning process, if I'm correct, and then was taking information as she went along. And Patrick very much built it on what was the existing practice in the school and the interests of students. So we'll just have a quick scan down through those. And yeah, so feedback to David: accessible and simple concepts, very well thought out and adapted to meet the needs of learners. Thank you very much to the anonymous person that mentioned that. Amy, again, very creative and got the learners involved in the process despite the school not being digital. And Patrick, excellent idea, and he got the whole community involved unintentionally, which is brilliant. Also, the prizes are a nice touch. And that's true, myself and Patrick had a good conversation there. In PE, we aim to meet both the performer and the participant. And I think his idea of bringing the team element in there could really be motivating for all. Making contact with those who are on the verges are important. So this contribution is very much linked back to activity 3 in terms of those hard to meet students. The check-in may be time consuming, but demonstrates the concern for student welfare. That's laudable. So thank you very much. And I hope the 3 contributors are listening. Some feedback for Amy: check out Slína Sláinte, which gives the walk more diversion. So that's really good feedback for Amy. And you can add in more challenges on that route. Very good. So as well as the cardiovascular endurance workout they might be having by the walk, you can bring in an element of muscular and so on there. So thank you. Aoife O'Malley, very effective and meaningful for the students. So I really like the continuity from Patrick also. They just adapted to the environment that they now have to work in. So Amy's applauding Patrick on the continuity that he offered. Very good. Find your happy pace is a neat line to remind students of the importance of pacing for longer distance events. So with regard to the challenge that Patrick found for students in pacing themselves, it's we've got some really good feedback here. I'm going to move from this question to activity 5, because this is quite an open-ended one, and it's where you can provide feedback to either David, Amy, or Patrick, because that type of feedback we provide would be applicable to everybody that's listening here tonight. What aspect of their feedback, what aspect of their practice really appealed to you or surprised you? Have you any feedback for the 3 teachers, and what might you do differently in your context? So again, just take a second, because I think this is the really rich part of the presentation. And again, we're creating an archive that we can come back to and review at a stage tomorrow, next week, next month. Yeah, so Lee Mariel here has just commented, all activities encourage participation first, but also challenge students through competition amongst classes and year groups. And I think like in any PE context, it's very important how we frame that competition so that we encourage everybody. So Liam, sorry, is it Liam? Liam Mariel, thank you very much, Liam, for that. I like the idea of taking students' opinions at the beginning so that they have choice and more engagement. And I think that's as applicable in real time in our normal PE class as it is here. So thank you very much for that contribution. We can really build in engagement from the start. Just scroll down, maybe Stephen Cahill, like Patrick's use of Strava, particularly setting up a team. So we're getting students' use of the digital means, which was identified as relevant learning earlier on. So Patrick, I think unintentionally, Patrick to some extent, has actually managed to meet a physical activity need, plus also a digital need. Orla Thornton, gives me hope, have had very little engagement from students and not tried the idea of a competition to really capture student attention. Sometimes students like the trendy pieces or the viral pieces. not corona, but the viral type of appeal that they have in terms of grabbing attention. I really like the idea of getting student feedback in order to structure and plan relevant activities. And again, that's as relevant in real time as it is to now. Similar to Patrick, another school here did a 5K challenge, but students had to screenshot their times on their app, like Map My Run. Doing this, students can see each other's times and cannot be put off participation. I think is how that contributor finished it. The competition element is good, and again, Susan Byrne, I think it's balanced in how you present it. The idea of using a point system and a variety of activities to engage students, and again, that point system can be very student-led, like David has done. He's used the point system more as a reflective tool than as a point system in itself, although it's been used for both modes. So there's some really strong pieces. I like this one, I'm not finished on it. Make sure there is education, make sure there is learning, and it's not just doing for the sake of doing, it's not just a training session. So I really like this contribution here as well. And I think a strong way to ensure that there is learning is to really link it back to the learning outcomes, and let the learning outcomes be a key piece of what directs learning here. So just having a quick scan to learning outcomes within the P-Short course. Just on my screen at the moment, setting smart improvement goals, applying principles of training, evaluating, engaging their progress in a program, using measurement techniques to monitor and analyze physical activity levels, such as Strava, identifying strategies to support ongoing participation, and leading activities that they find enjoyable and that can undertake, and that allow them to be aware of what the minimal physical activity recommendations are. So in terms of planning our work, now when we know the needs of students, the curriculum documents can be very supportive in terms of planning that forward. So we've taken a nice snapshot there. I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint presentation itself here. So just bear with me again. And I've made reference to the learning outcomes. I'm going to make a reference to one other structure. And I'm conscious of time, that we're approaching 7:30. To be fair to those presenters that have prepared, I'm going to continue. And if people do want to log off, you're more than welcome to. But I'm going to continue for those that have prepared their work here. One other piece I'm going to bring attention to. It might be very late in the year to consider this as an option in terms of continuing learning. But the classroom-based assessment has got this type of, can be facilitated via distance learning, because a key part of it is to facilitate development of feedback to students during and at the end of the process, which I think is what we saw happen very much to our 3 teachers here. Students reflecting the learning is also a key part of the CBA. So when we interrogate the CBAs, one stands out for me, and I think it does for a lot of us. It's the Strand 1 classroom-based assessment, physical activity for health and well-being. Now this takes a period of time to undertake, so it may be too late in the school year to consider it, but there might be aspects of it that could readily apply to your support of students over the coming while, and as they look to the summer, and perhaps some restrictions at the start of the summer as well. Because in this physical activity program, students are assessing their ability to plan for, implement and evaluate a personal physical activity program designed to meet their own goals. So you can see the individualized piece here over a focused period of time. So the reference to so a way to take this further, which wouldn't be today, is to look at the specification and the outcomes, and also the guidelines for the classroom-based assessment. So a structure has been developed to perhaps support students in this. And another piece that builds on this is students have the opportunity then to profile their achievement, both at the time and also at the end of their junior cycle experience. So it's one that we may explore further at another date and time. I'm going to hand over to Claire Walsh. Claire is, as I mentioned earlier, a physical education teacher, educator in the University of Limerick. So I'm going to share my screen with, share Claire's screen. And I'm going to make sure that Claire has access to speak just now as well. So Claire, I might ask you to unmute your microphone there, Claire, if possible as well. So sorry, Claire, we just can't hear you just right now. So if you could just unmute your microphone, that would be very helpful. There you go, Claire. You should be able to speak now.
Yeah, sorry. Okay, so you can hear me now?
We can, 100%, Claire. Thank you.
Okay, great. So thanks a million for asking me to participate in this webinar tonight. So as Mike already mentioned, I'm a teacher educator at the University of Limerick, and I also work with the JCT. So I was asked to speak about teacher wellbeing and just some of my thoughts on it. So just COVID-19 is challenging for everybody. Our daily lives and routines have been disrupted, and we have a new normal for the time being. There is a lot of focus on students at this time, which is indeed appropriate, but I also feel we need to consider ourselves as teachers and as educators. The wellbeing curriculum which we have is intended for junior cycle students, but I've been thinking about this and considering if aspects of it, especially the language use, could be helpful for teachers and ourselves during this time. So as part of my role in UL, I wrote a blog piece, and I applied these indicators, these wellbeing indicators, as you can see, to myself and my own life during this time. This time feels like a roller coaster for me, and probably for some of you as well. Some days are good, some days are not so good. Some days are productive and some days are not so productive. Some days everything is under control and some days everything is completely out of control, like work, emotions, eating habits, etc. But the more that I talk to friends and family and colleagues, I'm realizing that this is the same for many of us. So for instance, under the active, I said I try to move once a day. When responsible, I have to keep up to date with my work commitments. Connected, trying to call or text family, friends and colleagues. Resilient, really trying to limit my own news intake and endeavouring to stick to some sort of a routine. Respected, keeping the space outside the 2 meters, but also I really feel that it's important, especially any of us, when you're sharing the indoor space at home with others, trying to respect that and then respect your own space, and then to be aware and a reminder that it's okay maybe not to be operating or feeling the way I usually do. So we're used to working with deadlines and timelines and timetables, and now these aspects aren't so clear. So I just have found for myself that day by day is one way to cope. For me, the biggest one was realizing that my pattern of work and life has changed for the time being, and boundaries that were set naturally before need to be reconsidered when I start, when I stop, and how I switch off. This is something that I have to keep on reminding myself. We are in different situations with our families and home lives at the moment, and really that is our priority, our health and our family's health. We need to know when to stop and to be okay with that. And then this just brings me on to the next government campaign that we've seen being advertised on the television, In This Together. And I can feel that just after looking at it, some of this campaign is very similar to the wellbeing curriculum. And you could actually map most, if not all, of the wellbeing indicators to this. For instance, active is staying active, aware, looking after our mental health, connected, helping in the community, resilient, coping at home. And then I suppose the most important message was, you know, to stay connected, and we're all trying to make it through this together and helping one another out. And in the booklet that has actually been shared with us, the final page, you'll actually see a link to this campaign. So thanks very much for listening and for allowing me to participate. And I just finally would like to commend the work showcased by our teaching colleagues here tonight and the incredible approaches that they have had to listening to their students and responding to their needs at this time. And I urge you are conscious and to make sure you're conscious of your own needs and take the time to meet these also. Thanks very much.
Claire, thank you so much for that contribution. So you've got some lovely observations on it. I asked my colleague Ciara Byrne. Ciara is overseeing the support for teachers in SPHE. I asked her just to observe tonight's webinar and see were there any observations that she had. So I'm going to share my screen, or ask Ciara just to share her screen at the moment. And Ciara has just unmuted herself as well. So Ciara, if you're, when you bring up your screen there, Ciara, we'll be able to proceed. That's it. Lovely. Off you go.
Hi, Mike. Thanks so much for inviting me in this evening. And I really enjoyed listening to all of the different pieces that have gone through this evening and what's been there to say. They've been really interesting. As Mike said, I work with him in JCT as the person who looks after SPHE. And Mike asked me to come in and have a look at how we might explore that curricular area of well-being and the connections between PE and SPHE and how we could access those to support students. And it struck me as listening this evening, I had the indicators of well-being here, as they provide a structure that connect SPHE and PE together within the well-being programme. And I really like that piece there from Claire Walsh around the government piece around looking after ourselves and connected together, and how it fits with those well-being indicators as well, and how they can apply to our own lives. But it struck me as listening, the natural one that we obviously think of when we think of PE is active, but listening to so many of the examples tonight, like St. Coleman's virtual 5 kilometres, that connects with active, but it also goes in there with connected and creating a sense of online community and a sense of community for students. And a lot of the responses that have been coming from students around the needs that are emerging fit into that area of looking for that connection and being aware of that connection, how important it is. And it's so nice to see that those connections are being made across the board. So I just wanted to have a look here at, sorry, some technical difficulties there. Just wanted to have a look at the definition of well-being within junior cycle. And I wanted to bring this PE learning in and look at it as part of the bigger picture in regards to student well-being. So PE and SPHE along with CSP making up those 3 core pillars of well-being programme. And I think there's a huge opportunity to make these links at the moment, because they can hugely beneficial in supporting students. And if we look at that definition there of student well-being in junior cycle, it's present when students realise their abilities, take care of their physical well-being, cope with the normal stresses of life, and have a sense of purpose or belonging to a wider community. And I think if we listen to some of the amazing examples we had tonight of PE and some of the extraordinary lengths teachers have gone through, it really fits into all of those categories. So you have taken care of their physical well-being, but for many, that running or the yoga or the PE with Joe Wicks that they're engaging with, that could be how they're coping with stress or how they are relating to the wider community, like that example of St. Coleman's 5 kilometres together. Or the Foodie Fridays that Amy talked about, connecting PE in a lovely cross-curricular approach, but getting family involved, which really speaks again to that relationships and connectedness and being part of a community. And SPHE provides a space for students to work towards this. So if we look at the rationale, where we're talking about supporting student wellbeing in a rapidly changing world, and students' worlds like our own have changed considerably over the last number of weeks, and we want to step back and see how we can support students doing the above from a distance. So how do we develop a student understanding of themselves to take care of themselves and make informed decisions? And if we look at this planning piece, so the wellbeing principles of planning, there's a big one here, and it's come through in nearly every example we've gone through, and come through in every example that's been on the Padlet, which is the meeting the emerging needs and the new needs of students and bringing them into that student needs and context space. And while there's an emerging need, SPHE can identify it and help students reflect on what they need for their well-being. There's a massive connection here for PE departments. It's definitely needed in order to consider fulfilling this emerging need and a bigger picture on a school level. So if we have a look at one example of meeting an emerging need, I have one here. And I've actually heard a lot of examples tonight on the Padlet around creating fitness journals or diaries, or charting their progress during school closures in a reflection diary, which is a core part of SPHE. And I have one here. So one of the key elements of SPHE is students keeping a reflective diary. And this school example is actually from my own school. And they've been keeping a wellbeing diary that is going through the SPHE teacher. But you can see that it's being done in collaboration with the PE department. And you can see that there under the staying active, they're giving them a challenge with their tutor groups, because physical activity piece they thought was such an important aspect of student well-being, and they felt they couldn't look at well-being in SPHE without connecting and including that pillar of SPHE in there as well, or PE in there as well, and it would allow for students to make those connections. And you can see that challenge and community aspect there with their tutor groups. So they're trying to encourage that sense of community as well. And one of the key areas of SPHE that we're kind of focusing on ourselves at the moment, that PE again ties in really strongly to, is the area of mental health, which is one of our strands. And when we're looking at the learning outcomes here around coping skills and relaxation techniques and understanding positive mental health, responses coming from students with teachers who are doing surveys on the ground, overwhelmingly there's a lot of references and a lot of learning here in that physical education space or the physically active space. They're saying that at the moment, getting outside, being in nature, going for a run, doing that yoga is hugely important to them at the moment, and it's hugely important as part of their mental health. So again, trying to strengthen those two areas together, because they really do help support the overall well-being of students, and they make up those two pillars together. So I'm going to hand back over to Mike.
Great. Ciara, thank you so much for that. I'm going to take just control of the board again there. I want to thank Claire and Ciara very much for their contribution on that. I'm going to set some over volume because I'm not going to deal with it now. I want to just look at our further resources. But your homework for this week is on column 5. Is based on the webinar tonight. What's the next step that you'd undertake within your school? And I would like you, maybe not now, but definitely to give that some thought over time, because by mapping that, you're actually sharing with the other community of teachers that are here as well. So I would ask you to return to that maybe after the webinar, if you do get a few moments. So sorry now. So I'm just going to look to some further support that we have. I've asked Martina Finneran, who is an associate advisor with JCD, but also an executive member of the PEI, to share some of the work that they're doing as well in terms of supporting teachers. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Martina, and I'm also going to unmute Martina if possible. There you go, Martina. And you might just, there you go, Martina. Thank you.
Hi, Mike. Yeah, that's great. Thanks very much. Hi, everybody. As Mike said, my name is Martina Finner, and I'm a practicing PE teacher in Strokestown in Roscommon. I'm also an associate advisor with the JCT, but I'm here with my PEI hat on as an executive member, just to bring to your attention some of the supports that have been currently developed by the PEI. And these have been developed basically on request from our members. So our members have gotten in touch with us and posted questions and comments, looking for support in certain areas on all of our different social media platforms, which are detailed there on the slide. Today we launched our virtual call, which is basically a series of screencasts which have been developed into a webinar, looking at different areas that teachers have made contact with us and required maybe some further information or some support in those particular areas. There are 5 topics covered within the webinar. Topic 1 is looking at our website and how to access the resources within the website as a PEI member. Topic 2 is helping teachers who would normally be looking forward to planning their sports days, looking at maybe taking this into the online space in a virtual sports day. And this also is done, it's done actually as both Microsoft Teams and on the Google Classroom platforms. Topic 3 then is to help teachers to get some ideas for assessment and also for reporting on students who are not exam year students. So looking at your first, second, TYs and 5th years. And then topic 4 is looking at our LCP and SCPE, both a review and an update of phase 1 and phase 2, which is obviously starting in September 2020. So for teachers who are stepping into the Leaving Cert PE space in September 2020, it's important. And also the information that is given on the circular, which was released last October, Circular 61/2019, which details the changes at senior cycle particularly in relation to the alignment of PE programs to the new SCP framework, and also the mandatory offering of PE to all students at senior cycle. So that's important information for teachers when it comes to conversations with management. Our topic 5 then is details recent research that's been carried out in the PE area in our 3 physical education teacher education institutes at UL, UCC and DCU. For teachers who are considering taking on some research, there is also a lot of information there on the types of areas that they can research into, and also ways that they can access funding. So there's good information there in that topic for teachers in that area. The virtual call is one of the current initiatives that the PAI are involved in. Responding to our teachers earlier last month, we created screencasts because many teachers had not worked in the online space before, particularly in the teaching of PE. So we created screencasts for teaching PE on both the Microsoft Teams and the Google Classroom platform, and then also using the Padlet as a resource for putting out information to your students. We have recently updated and developed our website resource area, and we've done that as a response to the changes, the lots of changes in the PE curriculum at both junior and senior cycle, and also to ensure that our members have some up-to-date resources for teaching in those areas. There is currently a survey in circulation to find out what supports our teachers who are teaching PE through the medium of Irish require, and that is important that we get as much feedback from our members on what their needs are within those areas. And then obviously we are currently in the planning process for our main CPD event of the year, which is our PAI conference, which we hope to hold later this year in Carlow. Basically, our 4 main platforms are there on the screen. We welcome feedback from teachers on the current initiatives that we obviously have available, and those are all available on those platforms, but also on any further supports that you think would be useful to you as teachers at this time, and obviously going forward, going back to schools in September. So please feel free to contact us through those social media outlets and let us know where you're at and where we can help. And that's me, so thanks very much. I'll hand you back to Mike.
Very good, Martina. Thank you very much. I'm just about to share my screen there again. So I'll just check my audience view. Yeah, okay, good. So guys, I just want to draw, thank you so much for that, Martina. And the support document, we've created this archive document so that you can have a reference point afterwards as well. Detail of what, from page 1, detail of what Martina has just spoken through is accessible there on page 16 of the document regarding the virtual call, regarding the PI meeting the needs, as well as how to access the various network and the email for the PI. And just one other piece, I'd like to just acknowledge the contribution that the contribution that the PI have made to the development of this webinar, but also their support of our work earlier in the year and last year as well via their conference. So it's very thankful for your support there. Just giving a nod again to that final document. So it's just up to me to tidy up a few pieces here now as we approach 10 to 9. That support document, we've referred to it quite a few times. It's a very strong reference point. As well as resources from the PEI, you've got resources, examples of resources from the local sports partnerships, some of the national governing bodies, a huge nod to the Active Schools flag and the work that they're undertaking in promoting physical activity in both primary schools and post-primary schools. Active Schools Week occurred last week and it was active at home. So there's a strong reference point in the booklet, which I'll just refer to again on that. So just want to raise your awareness to the Active School flag and the initiative that has been undertaken there. And as you can see, further detail is available there by that website. So just putting together the final few strands, I really want to just reflect on the learning intentions that we had. And I hope that both now and as you review the Padlet and review the booklet, that we've been able to identify the relevant learning for our students during this unprecedented times and where it sits, ICT, but very much so, physical activity for health and well-being came across very strongly. And engage with ideas. I think we've engaged and can continue to engage with those ideas that teachers have presented, and we can add our own via the Padlet after. So with that, I want to sincerely thank all of the PE teachers that contributed to both the preparation for the webinar and those that have given their time so well, overtime even on a Thursday afternoon. And basically, if you do want any further information, just please feel free to follow up via our email address. It's probably best there, info@jact.ie, and we'll be very happy to follow up on anything from tonight's webinar. So I hope it's been of use. We'll still be answering questions in the background for the coming while, and thank you very much for your time.